evening, welcome back. You're watching the Urban Debate on Mirror Now. I'm Faye and thank you for joining us. The big debate, of course, is the fact that this Modi government has now completed 4 years in government with only 1 year to go before the next election. It's time for a review on whether or not this government has achieved all or most of its promises. Joining me on the show right now, Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha with the Congress Party, Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court. Dr. Singhvi, good evening and thank you for joining us. In your opinion, has the Narendra Modi government managed to achieve any of its goals or all of its goals? How would you rate the last 4 years?
Please don't think that I'm saying it merely because I speak for the opposition. If you look carefully, there is hardly an area which can require or get approbation except the fact that we have a very powerful orator in a Prime Minister. He can weave dreams, he can have jumlas, he can have all kinds of acronyms, but the moment you start examining on facts and figures, I think this is the most hollow set of claims ever made by the government. There are innumerable areas and we don't have time to talk about it. But if you were to force me to have a checklist of the minimum 2 or 3, which is the worst scenario ever in the last 4 years, I think jobs and agricultural distress would take the cake. Ms. D'Souza, do you know that, by the way, you know that agriculture growth even of 3% is considered very good, because 3% agricultural growth would boost your GDP a lot. We had for many years 4.2% year on year. Do you know the rate of growth average per year of this government on agricultural growth? 1.2%. Now, the Prime Minister with all this has the courage to tell the nation with 1.2% average annual growth rate of agriculture that I will double farm incomes by 2022. Well, all I can say is that with all the magic Mr. Modi can weave, he would have to be some kind of a super magician, somebody from outer space, because for doubling farm incomes after 6 years from today, you would need to have agricultural growth from now till then of roughly 10 to 12%.
Dr. Singhvi, but
now, how absurd can we get? And the same figures I have for jobs.
Right, and we'll come to jobs. I will ask you a specific question on jobs. But to talk about what you said on agriculture, in the last union budget, the finance minister did announce a minimum support price for farmers. They did announce, you know, they've worked on the soil health cards. They've worked on a lot of benefits for farmers. They've worked on irrigation, they tell us, last mile connectivity or the narrow canals for farmers. Wouldn't you rate that, it might not be a 10 on 10, but wouldn't you rate that as good work done?
Faye, you have just given an example which far from 10 on 10 would be struggling to get 0 on 10. And I mean it. Your example itself nails the lie. MSP is what you mentioned. Now, firstly, on 1.2 versus 4.2, there can be no debate. It's statistics. So it's less than 1 mark out of 10. Now, the MSP you mentioned, page 44 of the 2014 manifesto of the BJP specifically says, we shall ensure that you will get cost plus 50% as per Swaminathan report. Categorical, black and white. Look at the absolute utter hypocrisy and double voicedness. This is in May 2014, a government comes to power on this manifesto. In June or July of 2014, I forget the exact date, the Supreme Court gets an affidavit from this government saying, we are not able to give you cost plus 50%. Number 3, this position endures from 2014 to 2018. 4 years. Now you tell me, Faye, what is the credibility if you get up in the last year of your governance, with elections looming next year, obviously to catch the public eye, to make a tall claim, you say, now in the budget of 2018, after 4 years of sleeping, I am announcing an MSP. Is that not, do you think people are eating grass? And I don't want to go into the 5th point, which is that even the MSP now announced for the last year, which has got hardly, 1 crop or 1.5 crops left, is on what is cost plus 50%. The way to calculate cost is not the way Swaminathan recommends.
Right. Let's also talk about jobs before we run out of time. I do want to understand where you stand on jobs, because this was a very specific promise that was made by this government in the beginning of its term. The arguments that are being given to us right now is because there's a lot of infrastructure that's being built, rural roads, rural electrification, irrigation, and several other projects, large projects across the country, tunnels that are being inaugurated at this point, highways that are being inaugurated. They automatically generate jobs. Also, the Mudra scheme that generates jobs. Do you have a rebuttal to that? And do you think the government has done a good job as far as jobs is concerned?
I think the government is downright, prevaricating and spreading falsehoods when it talks about jobs. Number one, you have a 2 crore promise, again the same manifesto, the same Prime Minister, the same stump speeches, the same promises. Number two, you have a CMIE. Now the CMIE is not a Congress organization, it's a Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy. It's a completely different statistical organization. It has published more than 1 year ago a report saying directly minimum 15 lakh jobs, that's 1.5 million jobs lost only by demonetization. Point number three, when we say all this, we just with a flourish, and obviously you're repeating what the government says, highways, tunnels. Are we living in a jungle? Was this not being done earlier? Is this the government of India which has a system of recording jobs? It's not that we are recording jobs by peering through our binoculars and seeing how many people in the street are working and people adding up. There's a system to it. We are 71 years old. We have had a system before Mr. Modi's government came, although he likes to think that there is no government before that. Well, why don't those statistics, which are two, one is the labor force published, the rate of growth of employment or unemployment as the case may be, and the actual addition to the workforce. What do they show? They show a paltry few thousand jobs a year, 76,000 in 1 year, 85,000 in 1 year, added. Number three, the complete fraud in the nation is by this, employee contribution thing. One day the government, one fine morning, wakes up and announces with a flourish that a lot of things are not required to be reported to EMI. You know, when you're an employee, you're reporting 5 items. You don't report 1 item. So the same employee was asked to report that 5th missing item. Now when the same employee reported that, there's a surge in those reports. So they said these are new jobs.
Right. So,
I mean, is this a joke? Why aren't the normal indices of industrial production showing job creation, the labor force creation, the rate of growth of employment? Now Mudra, why don't you measure it and tell us? Is there any statistical study apart from the Prime Minister saying that even making, anything on the road or selling, jalebis on the road is also jobs? Why doesn't it not record it or capture in some statistic?
Right, and Dr. Singhvi, of course, the argument here would be that the BJP has managed, or the Modi government has managed to keep the fiscal deficit low. This was a promise that was made. It was well above 4% during the UPA regime. It's been brought below 4% right now. It's close to 3.5%, and there's a promise to bring it down even further. So that is statistics, that is data. It cannot be denied.
No. Everything they say camouflages a bigger lie. Take this example you gave. Yes, their notional deficit figure is somewhat lower than us. But A, they have exceeded the limit provided by that statute of fiscal management each year. They've exceeded that by 0.2, 0.3, 0.4%. More important, inflation in a generic sense you talk, it hides more than it reveals. The real inflation you talk about is food inflation, oil inflation. What hits the common man? These two. You know where it's touching? They don't talk about that ever.
Right.
Third, it's not an end in itself to just control the budget. You have to show growth with control of, to control the deficit. You have to show along with that growth. You have to show along with that development. There's no point publishing a figure of 3.3 or 3.2 and then say, look, we are so high in this control.
Right. Dr. Singhvi, thank you so much for joining us right now on this conversation. I understand that on a scale of 1 to 10, you wouldn't give this government 5?
No, I would grudgingly give it 1.
Grudgingly give it 1. All right, we're going to take a quick break here. That was Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi. But on the other side, the big debate on this very point. How has the government performed over the last 4 years on four main areas: agriculture, jobs, infrastructure, and of course, farmers? We'll come back on the other side. Nalin Kohli, Yogendra Yadav, Mohan Guruswamy, Sanjay Jha on the other side. Don't go anywhere.
In a few days, the Modi government will complete 4 years. And as India looks ahead to elections in 2019, the NDA government has made grand plans to mark the achievements of their 4 years in government. In an exclusive, Mirror Now spoke with top ministers, and they say India continues to be happy with the Modi Sarkar, and the country is on track for the promised Achhe Din.
I am confident that our government is trying as possible that we want to create jobs in the rural and agriculture sector, and this ethanol policy is going to create at least making of some more than 1,000 industries.
9 crore people have got jobs through self-employment, through Mudra loans. That is recorded names. 9 crore people name are there. 7.5 crore toilets are created, so they create employment. When the roads are built, they create employment.
But there are issues the NDA government has not been able to tackle. Home budgets have been hit. Farmers continue to be in distress. And the latest dent on the Modi juggernaut is the fuel price rise. With 1 year to go to the general elections, Mirror Now examines if the Modi Sarkar has delivered on what it promised. We ask, did the Modi government deliver on the jobs promise? Did the Modi government deliver on the promise to farmers? Did the Modi government control Mehengai? And did the Modi government deliver on infrastructure promises? Let's debate.
Well, it has been 4 years and it's time for a report card and a review. So we've broken this up in order to make it fairly simple. We're looking at 4 main areas. But I want to remind you of the last 4 years, viewers. We started off talking about smart cities, housing for all by 2022, Skill India, Stand Up India, Digital India, Swachh Bharat. There were a lot of acronyms that we worked with. Digital India, we had demonetization, we had GST. There was a lot of movement. If anything, this government can never be criticized of policy paralysis. This is the opposite of paralysis. The government has kept us guessing, and there have been new programs and ideas and announcements that came over the last 4 years that completely kept us on our toes. The question that we're asking today is, how did the Modi government do over the last 4 years in 4 specific areas? And these are the areas: jobs, farmers and agriculture, prices and Mehengai, and infrastructure. And the reason why we've picked these 4 areas over all of the others is because these were specific promises made by the BJP when it came into power, and specific promises that they've continued to make over the last 4 years. Now, in order to keep this a structured and a clean debate, we have, of course, buzzers that will go off. Each member of the panel will be given 90 seconds, so a minute and a half, to make their opening arguments, after which you will hear a bell. And you will also be given a minute and a half each to make your rebuttals to the person you disagree with, after which you will hear a bell as well. This will ensure that everybody in the audience can understand your arguments and appreciate them, as opposed to what happens when people talk over each other. But the reason why we're doing a buzzer debate is because of the quality of the panel that we've put together. Nalin Kohli, spokesperson of the BJP, Yogendra Yadav, national president of the Swaraj Abhiyan, Mohan Guruswamy, senior economist and chairperson at the Centre for Policy Alternatives, Shailesh Gandhi, former Central Information Commissioner, Sanjay Jha for the Congress Party, Krish Lakshmikant, managing director at Headhunters India. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, a minute and a half to each panelist to make their opening arguments, and the questions are fairly simple. How do you believe the Modi government has done in the last 4 years, specific to do with jobs, farmers, prices and infrastructure? You can pick any one of these 4 topics and start. You could also tell us whether you believe the government has done well, whether the government has failed, or it's been strictly average. I'm going to start with Mr. Nalin Kohli. Mr. Kohli, your time starts now. Your first 90 seconds of opening arguments. Go ahead, please.
I think if you look at Narendra Modi ji's 4 years, then you will find a few things clearly coming across. That at a relentless pace, there is something happening for everyone. Is it perfect? Is everything being done completely? No, there's a lot to be done. But has a lot been done? Certainly. And that's evident from the fact, if you're going to have about 12 crore Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana accounts, financial inclusion, it's huge. If you are looking at Ujjwala, where you have 4 crore people who have got the gas connection and women freed from the drudgery of looking for firewood and burning. Out of them, 70% going for the refills. That's also big. If you are looking at in terms of the target of reaching out for self-employment, which is Mudra, 12 crore people again take in loans. Now that means self-employment is taking place. Infrastructure, roads built in national highways 25-30 kilometers a day compared to 6-7 kilometers earlier. 169 kilometers of rural roads. If you look at electrification, every village electrified. If you're looking at airports and if you're looking at air travel, phenomenal. 25 airports in 2 years, 75 in 65 years. So GST, the IBC code, if you're looking at RERA, there's been something for someone. And if I look at farmers, neem coating of fertilizers, more crop per drop, ENAM, 585 markets linked together, and 90 lakh people registered. Women's security, the ordinance brought in there. So I think there's work still to be done.
90 seconds
but if
up.
there is any denial that work has not been done, that would be incorrect.
All right. I'm going to go over to Yogendra Yadav right now, who is who I assume is going to be more critical of the government. Yogendra Yadav, your 90 seconds begins now. Do you believe the Modi government has done well in the last 4 years?
I wish I could say that. I would love to, because that would be my country's gain, not merely Modi government's gain. But sadly, I cannot. The reason I fail to say so is, look at the promise for the farmers. Well-being for farmers, doubling of income. What is the record? 4 years, the total increase in income is 1.6%. Unemployment, what was the promise? 1 crore jobs a year. What is the reality? No one knows. Every day new job data is being invented. The government junks its own data. And every survey shows greater anxiety about unemployment. On infrastructure, roads, I would give this government a credit for. The cost has been lowering of all the environmental norms that were achieved in the last 20 years. But for me, infrastructure is also irrigation. Terrible performance. Just one project completed out of 23 they had listed. For me, education is infrastructure. Lowering of budgetary expenditure on education. And the fourth thing that you had mentioned was, sorry, I just forget the fourth area that you had mentioned.
The 4 points, yes. Infrastructure, Mehngai, farmer crisis and job creation. Yes.
Mehngai, yes, yeah. For Mehngai, yes, inflation measured economically has been low, but let us largely give the credit for that to West Asia, to the low crude oil prices, and in reality, the Mehngai for ordinary person, which is unaffordability of basic things, has not changed.
Has not changed. All right, Mohan Guruswamy, very senior economist. Mr. Guruswamy, your 90 seconds on whether or not you believe this government has done well.
Well, it all depends on how you look at it. There are two ways of judging a performance of any government. One is against what was promised, that is written in the manifesto. Second is, how does it compare with the previous government, previous tenure of the previous government? And then by these yardsticks, it will be very difficult to give this government very high marks. Look at the manifesto, what did they promise? They promised, 100 new cities, high-speed rail network. They promised increase in irrigation, all kinds of things. Where are they on their promises on that? After all, they came and sought our votes on that, and they said we will, restore financial order, and we will get money back from abroad. We will reduce NPAs. We've recapitalized the banks. Nothing has been done. All you hear is a lot of data rolling out. We've doubled construction, but where is the data? Produce the facts. You just say 6 kilometers a day in the previous government is wrong. And then you say I've done 40 kilometers a day now, which is wrong. The reality is somewhere in between both cases. Now, you can say we've created jobs by just giving figures. Mudra, we've created, we've advanced 9 lakh crores, and therefore we've created jobs, 4 million, 3 million, 4 crore, 3 crore jobs. The total refinance of Mudra has been 633 crores. The rest are all ongoing schemes. So if you can create 3 crore jobs in 633 crores, then I think we should put this whole country on this Mudra scheme.
Right.
Increase the apportionment to 50,000, 60,000 crores.
All right.
Playing with facts. The biggest.
Your 90 seconds are up, Mr. Guruswamy, but I will come back to you because I'm sure there are arguments about the job point you made. Krish Lakshmikant, Managing Director of Headhunters India, bringing in specifically an expertise in job creation. Krish, your 90 seconds will begin now, but do you believe that 1 crore jobs have been generated in the country, or maybe half that amount?
Faye, job creation has not been the kind of thing they targeted for. It has not happened for various reasons. But the fact is, whichever government comes to power, Congress, BJP, UPA, whatever it is, they cannot create jobs. That's an impossibility. We have to all live with it. But what I could see is that when I was reading some surveys in the Wall Street Journal, Economist, Times of India and all, I saw almost 58 to 60% of the people like Modi. They say Modi has done a reasonably good job. Now at the end of 4th year, if that is the kind of mark ratings he is getting, I'm sure he will win the next election. Because I can see all these people, both BJP, Congress, everybody is talking about what will happen. The second thing is, if you look at the economy has definitely grown at around 7%. It is much more than the previous 5 years. Deficit has come down below 3%. Inflation is below 4%. These are all published figures. If you take airline traffic, it has gone up by 20%. So hotel occupancy has gone up by 70%. 7% is FMCG growth. Companies like Hindustan Lever and all that, they are growing at 7 to 8%. And most of this growth is coming from rural India, which means there is money there available. If you look at the jobs, yes, I agree with you, jobs they have not created. Right. But in the formal sector, we have been seeing that there is a sentiment. Right. We can see statistics available. About 20-25% is the growth in jobs this year compared to the previous year.
All right, your time is up. Your time is up. But I do want to invite Shailesh Gandhi, former CIC, Information Commissioner. Mr. Gandhi, how would you rate the government in 4 years?
Faye, a government has to be actually judged on many more factors, but you've chosen 4 or 5. And overall, I think this will give us a middling kind of performance. The government has not done very well on inflation. In fact, it's done disastrously. There's no question about it. Then, in terms of farmers are very unhappy. There is no question about it. Farmers are definitely very unhappy. And various farmers across the nation saying they are unhappy. I think the government must learn to listen to this. In terms of infrastructure, if one believes the figures that have been given by the government, I think the government has done well. Now, there are people who challenge these figures. At the end of the day, an individual cannot check that, and one believes the figures that the government gives in terms of roads, bridges, and so on. And if those figures are correct, it seems they have done a fairly good job. Coming to jobs, it is evident that they have failed disastrously on this. And they don't seem to have a policy about it. They keep talking of Mudra and various other things, but there is no policy of how jobs will be created, how many jobs have been created. That is not very clear. So that appears to be a failure, though the government is not admitting it. However, I must concede one thing. The government has managed to inspire people into believing that things are going to be good. Despite not having delivered, a lot of people seem to have faith in that. And I think that's an inspiring Prime Minister who perhaps matches Jawaharlal Nehru, a man who he dislikes. I think we've had Jawaharlal Nehru and then Mr. Modi as being inspirational prime ministers who promise something good is going to happen to the country.
But you know, while that is fair, Mr. Gandhi, and I promised I wouldn't rebut, unfortunately you can't fill your tummies with inspiration and with hope. At some point that has to actually turn into concrete changes. Sanjay Jha of the Congress, the last person to speak. 90 seconds starts now. Sanjay, I know you're going to give the government a tough review because you're in opposition, but you're going to have to also justify that tough review.
Yeah. I read the latest survey, Faye, CSDS survey that says that 47% of people of India don't want the Narendra Modi government to come back in 2019. I think that is a manifestation of the public disillusionment with a government that has betrayed everybody on the promises it made. Point number one, let's look at farmers. Farmer suicides have risen, farmers are on the streets, and the government of Mr. Modi, led by the Prime Minister himself, betrayed the farmers by promising MSP at cost of production plus 50% and let them down. On jobs, well, the government said 200 lakh jobs a year. By now, we should have had 800 lakh jobs. And what are we debating at the end of 4 years? Does India's demographic dividend have at least 7 lakh jobs? Which, by the way, is also very fictitious and questionable data. So on jobs, this government has been a mammoth disaster. I can debate with you on this till the cows come home. Point number three, let's look at private investment. I mean, India has actually failed to grow as an economy and provide jobs or create adequate GDP because there is very low private investment. That's a reality. Exports are at their lowest, perhaps, in the last 14 years. All these are, symptoms of an economic malaise that has set in. Let's look at the fifth point, inflation. This is a government that benefited from a huge tailwind of oil prices that were 80% lower than what they inherited from the UPA. And what did they do after that? They charged us taxes of 10 lakh crores. And where did that money go? Nobody knows. Okay. Capital assets grew by just 7% per annum. Nobody knows where that money is gone. And on governance, this government has been a mammoth disaster. Demonetization and the execution of the GST proof that they cannot run the economy in an efficient way. So I would say that, there are many other aspects that I would like to talk about. Time is up, yes. But at this point, looking at jobs, farmer issues, economy, the extortion of the middle class, and absolutely the flat level of growth. They inherited 6.9% GDP from the UPA. Yes. And you are, to be fair, completely out of time. So in 4 years, there's been no growth whatsoever. All right, rebuttals now from everybody, and then we'll open up the panel. Lalil Kohli, I know you're dying to rebut right now because Sanjay Jha has just finished speaking. Your 90 seconds of rebuttal begin now. Go ahead, please.
No, I'm not dying to rebuttal Mr. Jha at all. If you put your head into the sand, you won't see anything else except the darkness in the mud. So that's okay. They are entitled to put their head in the sand. Well I mean, when they talk about, and each data that you bring in is absolutely to suit a perspective that's not real. Well, let's take the Mr. Jha. I didn't interrupt you. I'm sure we can have a courteous discussion, or is it really too much asking of you? So therefore, coming back to the debate itself. So in terms of, say, petrol prices, and they're talking 10 lakh crores looted, I'm sure we can also have a fairly detailed discussion about the state of economy in 2014. I started by saying that there's something for everyone. Really? That if you'd say that the entire work is done, no, it's not. It's qualitatively trying to make a difference in the lives of everyone. And at the end of the day, in a political economy and in politics, the proof of the pudding is simply in terms of who wins an election. That right is with that mandate comes only from the people of India. They will judge separately in a country as diverse geographically, socially, socio-economically. They will decide who they wish to vote for. So far, if I look at the 4 years, the BJP has only grown in strength in terms of winning state elections to a large extent. We've added 14 more. So we are in 20 governments. Now that would be an indication that somewhere something is right. I mean, I don't think people vote again for a party they don't believe is doing something right. Even demonetization, Uttar Pradesh was a sweep. Right after demonetization,
Mr. Kohli, I'm going to interrupt you now. Because my question is that can't be the measure of success of a policy saying that we got voted back, so obviously everybody's happy. People might not necessarily know what is good for them. So you know, getting the Janta to vote you back into power is not a fair measure of economic policy. I don't think that would be the right argument. And now I'm opening this up.
No, I never said that.
You
I
just
never
did.
said that.
You just did. You said you swept into power after
I
demonetization.
Never said that.
And
Can I rebut
That's a
Mr.
political
Kohli?
line. I said in a political economy, and yes. And therefore, if I may also point out that when we debate
Can I
policies
rebut Mr.
different,
Kohli?
take GST. GST I look as a national resolve. A national credit, and credit must go to every party that unanimously stood there in Parliament and passed GST. It would be unfair to say that GST is only one party's contribution to the change in India. Then people would talk of the teething troubles. The Prime Minister said we are open to any changes. That means you have your ear on the ground when you make those changes unanimously again through the GST Council. That's why I say it's a national reform, and the nation celebrates with every political party contributing to it.
Mr. Yogendra Yadav rebuttals here to what Nalin Kohli has said, specifically to do with farmers. He did say, of course, and I'm quoting, he said that we have brought in various policies for the farmers, and the farmers are doing better under this government. Your rebuttal.
Actually, there is no need for rebuttal, because fortunately, both on the question of farmers and on the question of unemployment, there seems to be complete unanimity. My friend Nalin Kohli spoke about neem coating of seeds and fertilizers. I agree. I think that's a very good idea. If he thinks that neem coating substitutes for giving farmers better income, then I would wish him luck. So there has actually not been any difference on the question of employment. I'm glad that the one expert we have on the panel, who otherwise seems to be quite sympathetic to Mr. Modi, actually concedes that no, on job front they've done nothing. So there is no difference there. The one point that needs to be looked at is the question of public opinion. What if the public approves? Demonetization happened. I know it was embarrassing. I know it was stupid, but we got voted. You see, I would just draw attention to two things. Number one, please look at the survey which has come today. The survey, especially the CSDS tracker, which is clearly showing that now for the first time, the overall thing has shifted. It has turned. Today in India, those who do not want to give Modi another chance are more than those who want to give him another chance. So anti-incumbency has settled in full and proper. Mr. Kohli might wish to take note of this. To my mind, that does not prove that everything is wrong with his government. To my mind, the elementary premise of an argument is that the validity of an argument and the force that it has in terms of number of people supporting it are two entirely different things. Demonetization, even if 10 times anyone were to win elections, demonetization would go down in the history of India as one of the most stupid experiments, a criminal attack, onslaught on India's economy, no matter how many elections anyone might win. Just one word to Mr. Shailesh Gandhi. I have had the pleasure of a slight disagreement with him. He compared Mr. Modi with Nehru and spoke about inspirational. I thought the word was demagogy, and Nehru was not a demagogue. And today, when Mr. Modi's ratings are slipping, you see, people finally see, when they see that their Prime Minister is lying, that really affects their self-image. And this is what is happening. Finally, that magic, that black magic is cracking. Finally, the people are beginning to see the truth.
Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, do you want to respond to that?
I think Yogendra is being...
Mr. Yadav is entitled to have a personal view. I don't need to agree.
No, Shailesh Gandhi.
I'm sorry, did you ask me or Mr. Gandhi?
Shailesh Gandhi, please. Shailesh Gandhi.
Okay.
I think Yogendra is being dismissive about people's vote, and I noticed that in your statement also, Faye, when you said just because people vote, it doesn't mean it's right. I have this basic intrinsic stupid belief that in a democracy, people's vote is important no matter who it goes for. And as Yogendra says, if 47% people only want to vote for Modi again, last election when they won, only 31% wanted to vote. So if that is true, then in fact it means an improvement. I am not an apologist for Mr. Modi. I think there are a lot of things that are wrong with Mr. Modi and the current government. But one must also recognize that in some areas they have done reasonably well. Inflation, jobs poorly, very poorly. I would not give them more than 1 on 10. But on infrastructure, I think they have done distinctly better. And the Jan Dhan Yojana, in which they've opened some few crore bank accounts for poor, I think is a revolutionary step, which has not been thought of before.
Fair enough. And let me just clarify something, Mr. Gandhi. Nalin Kohli was talking about the fact that post-demonetization, the BJP swept to power in Uttar Pradesh, and that suggests that demonetization was good. And I said that's not a good way to review a policy based on an election result. A policy should be reviewed based on the targets that policy had when it was actually brought about. And that was my point. I'm a firm believer in democracy and the power of the vote as well. I just wanted to clarify that. Sanjay Jha, Shailesh Gandhi is saying that this government has done better than others in infrastructure.
Just a figure.
Yes, better than others. Okay, Yogendra Yadav, go ahead please, and then I'll bring in Sanjay Jha. Go ahead, very quickly though.
Just one figure. The figure I was quoting, probably I didn't make myself clear. The figure is that today 47% people say Narendra Modi government should not be given a chance to come back again, and only 39% are saying his government should be given another chance. So it's 47 no, 39 yes, and this figure actually compares to the figure that Dr. Manmohan Singh's government had in June 2013. At that time, it was 39 against him, 31 for him. The proportion is same, and therefore, the anti-incumbency has begun full and proper.
All right. Sanjay Jha, respond to infrastructure and Jan Dhan as two good points, two good pieces of work that this government has done so far.
Very quickly, Faye, let me tell you that as far as Jan Dhan is concerned, you are aware that it is just an old scheme which has been repackaged.
But it has been done.
Nothing new to talk about it. Many of those accounts have zero balances.
Okay.
No, just be finished. No, you can do it, but we all know the end result. We also know that on electrification, where the government made so much of noise, the challenge of electrification is, by the way, a long way to go. The Congress party took it to 97%, and the Modi government does 3%. So if I score 97 runs and Shailesh Gandhi scores 3 runs, he becomes man of the match, and I'm standing like a sorry loser on the other side. Absolutely irrational marketing done by Modi, and the country is discovering the truth. But let me answer the question to you. I just read a report this morning, in fact, this evening, which said that the frauds in banks in India under Narendra Modi in the last 4 years went up 3 times. There's not NPAs, so they can't say, the typical, this was an inheritance from the Congress. Frauds under Narendra Modi has gone up 4 times. And therefore, it links up to what I called about the lack of transparency in corruption. Shailesh is fully aware of how they have diluted the RTI, and the corruption is one issue where for some reason Narendra Modi has been able to bulldoze a lot of people into not talking about the corruption under the BJP. But Nirav Modi, Mehul Choksi, all these are manifestations of vulgar corruption under Narendra Modi. I read a statistic actually in the CSDS survey that rated that many people believe this government is perhaps the most corrupt we have had in years and years. 78% was the last data in an independent report of the number of people who felt this government was corrupt. So I think there's a larger fault line with this government. Economic is primarily, I think, beyond dispute. This government has been a mammoth disaster. But let's top it up with talking about transparency, destruction of institutions, pathetic governance, and last but not the least, the intimidation of the institutions of democracy.
Well, I want to bring in Mohan Guruswamy right now. Mohan Guruswamy, the big question, of course, that we haven't addressed is
I'd like to also come in, Faye, for a minute, please.
Yes. I know you'll want to respond to Mr. Guruswamy, so I'll allow Mr. Guruswamy to make a statement first. Mr. Guruswamy, there's an argument also that this government has managed to run the macroeconomics of the country better. The fiscal deficit is lower than it was in the UPA regime. We know that inflation is lower, interest rates are lower, the GDP is higher. Do you agree that macroeconomics, and from that point of view, this government has done a better job?
Well, you see, I have serious problems with who fixes the fiscal deficit. It's done in the Washington Consensus. The countries which grow and which fix these rates for developing countries are the ones which borrow the most. The debt to GDP ratio in the United States is about 270%. We are only 80%. So borrowing money itself is not bad, as long as you spend the money on capital expenditure on growth. So this whole business that the merchant bankers want a fiscal deficit target to be set, and you want to adhere to that. And we have blindly accepted this. China exceeds the fiscal deficit norms set by the Washington Consensus. China's debt to GDP ratio 238%, and is growing the fastest, and it's had the fastest growth for the last 40 years. So, you know, borrowing money to grow is not what businesses do it, everybody does it. But in our case, we borrow money to spend on ourselves, on bureaucrats, on other things. So the capital expenditure ratio today is not even 8% of the total expenditure. So you're not spending money for growth, you're spending money on consumption. Pay commission, this commission, that commission, and you're giving away subsidies. Subsidies in this regime has gone up by 70,000 crores, and it is now at about 250,000 crores. So this is direct subsidies. There are indirect subsidies, which we are not counting now. So all this, you know, has to be taken into account. So saying, and how did they manage to bring the fiscal deficit? The biggest reason for that is they increased petroleum taxes. 3 years ago, the petroleum tax was 1.6 lakh crores. This year, it was 3.4 lakh crores. And that money is gone to, and then you say, I've reduced the fiscal deficit. But you haven't increased capital expenditure, which has been flat. Your revenue expenditure is going up. So, you know, you've got to look at it holistically, saying fiscal deficit by itself is nothing. Okay? Now, as far as winning elections are concerned, Faye, I'd like you to know that Hitler won 2 elections. So you can swing public opinion on various reasons, for various causes. Hitler victimized the Jews and took votes. Hitler victimized the Allies and took votes. So, you know, you can do that, you can play that game once or twice, but in the end, joblessness will destroy you. If you have vast armies of people suffering and hungry, and today I've seen a statistic which says 57% of women in the reproductive age are anemic. 35% of children under 5 are stunted.
Yes.
And what are you talking about, this big thing about wanting to become a superpower and how well we've done? Those are indices you've got to look at. Fiscal deficit is one little aspect. Now, we have reports now, we have empirical studies which says that in the last 10 years, 73% of the growth has gone to 1% of the population. We've got to add to our billionaires. It might be a great thing for people in Bombay and other places in the banking circles. But how does it solve the country's problems? You don't have jobs, and then you create these fictitious details of jobs which have been created. People want jobs in the organized sector, jobs which pay well. You don't want to become chowkidars then at 6,000 rupees a month. It doesn't support a family. And those are the jobs you're getting now.
Right, okay, let Nalin Kohli respond to you, because you've made a lot of points. Nalin Kohli, I think the one that was sharpest of what Mr. Guruswamy said, he said Hitler won elections as well. That doesn't mean that the government is any good. You want to respond to that?
See, first I must clarify, Faye, because you brought it up twice. I never said that a popular vote is a confirmation of a policy. I was responding in context of what Mr. Jha said. He's a politician, and I gave him a political response.
Okay.
A policy is a policy. There have been governments that have come up with good policies and lost elections. And there are governments with bad policies and have won elections. That's a separate thing. There's much more to an election than a policy. And I think it would be demeaning democracy and it would be demeaning our intelligence to believe that generally speaking, and I'm using the word generally speaking, that good policy means good elections. I think what is important is we need to find a balance between both the political work and the other work. And in a political economy, what is, for example, the issue of subsidy? From those who will be at one end of the spectrum of economic thinking will say that subsidy should be removed. The other spectrum says that, excuse me, there are poor people, if there's no government net for them, where will they go? Whom will they depend on? So therefore, it has to be a mix of both. And then you have to see collectively in which direction is the country moving. So if I now start looking at it, keeping that background in mind, is the country moving forward or backward as compared to 14? Of course it's moving forward. That's acknowledged by virtually anyone except
No,
our
Mr. Kohli, I have to stop you there. Forgive me. I'm going to stop you there because I just want to understand something. I'm sorry. Isn't India fundamentally and has always been a welfare state? we look after those who cannot afford to feed themselves. That's my first point. At what point did we stop becoming a welfare state to say we can no longer hand out dole? We are not the UK, we are not one of those countries who can grudge the people who are hungry, who can grudge the children who are starving their meals. Secondly, if you tell us that you have been handing out free LPG connections and gas connections and electricity connections, I've personally given up my LPG subsidy so that somebody else can get a gas cylinder. Isn't that welfare?
So am I.
Isn't that what the government ought to do? How can we turn around and say we're not going to do this anymore?
That is also welfare.
We're a socialist state. We have to look after the
Nobody
people
can
who
do
are,
that.
who are not
That's
being
exactly
fed.
the point I'm making. Yes, but you see, I've also sat on panels, maybe not yours,
Faye, I have a rebuttal
where
here.
there are people who say, oh, we must remove subsidy on this issue.
Those people are wrong.
We must have, I've not even come to Mr. Sanjay Jha's. I mean, I need to rebut him also. I'm on a more intelligent point at the moment. So therefore, oh, we should remove subsidy
Yeah,
here.
I need to rebut him
So
too.
therefore, from that perspective, that's a different story. I didn't say you've made that too. So therefore, Faye, what I'm trying to say is, I don't see subsidy
Let's
going
disaggregate
in the
subsidies.
foreseeable future.
Let's
Not at least in my lifetime. Because there is so much disparity in India.
No,
That
there
to
are-
imagine subsidy going per se as a blanket rule
There
is
are-
not going to happen. I don't see that happening. Now Mr. Jha used the argument
It's
of
not going to
corruption.
happen, but
I want
deserved
to show
subsidies
me a
must increase.
single scam or an
Even
allegation of a
education is a
scam
subsidy.
against
Increase it.
Mr. Guruswamy, a little later, Mr. Guruswamy, I just need to finish my point. Mr. Guruswamy, you are an economist. You have a view, and I'm sure there are 20 economists on the other side who will have a diametrically opposite view to yours. I've sat in debates where there are two economists and both couldn't agree on the same issue. So therefore, that's how democracy is. You have an point of view on the economy, you are entitled to. So therefore, Mr. Jha said about corruption. Mr. Jha said...
I'm only clarifying. I'm only clarifying
Mr. Modi's
about
corruption.
subsidies.
What corruption is there? It's... Sir, I can't hear you. You must also forgive me.
Really?
I'm on a line as you are, and you know, when I'm speaking, when you speak, I don't understand. I just don't understand the point. So therefore,
What
I don't know if you're
corruption is
clarifying, adding, or taking me. So therefore, Mr. Jha was speaking of corruption. One example of corruption
Can you
against
just
the Prime
say what
Minister
corruption
Modi's
is
government.
there?
One.
No,
Any
no,
policy that
Mr.
has come out in there.
No, hang on.
Mr. Jha,
Nalin Kohli,
Faye,
Nalin
my
Kohli,
friend,
there is
Faye,
no
Jack,
evidence. One second.
55,000
I just want to bring this up here.
GSPC 20,000 crores. Bidla Sahara Daddies 40,000 crores. Now let's talk. Faye, he's raised a point. I am telling you right now, Nirav Modi
Your own president is out on bail on a corruption, alleged corruption case, Mr. Jha.
GSPC scam
What
is
is the
20,000
national
crores.
Okay, hang on,
What
hang
are
on,
you
gentlemen,
talking about?
gentlemen.
Bidla Sahara
One
Daddies,
second.
what are you talking about?
Don't yell at each
What
other.
are you talking about?
When
Your
India,
government is saying
one
your
second,
president
one
is out on
second.
corruption.
Bail in the national
You have
error
managed
case.
to hide it from the people of India, but not appointing the Lokpal.
All right, Sanjay Jha.
But diluting the whistleblower.
So the media, so therefore Faye's channel and everyone's channel is subservient to the government.
No,
are you saying?
let me ask the question again, please. Let me ask the question again. When
So
we
Faye is
talked
bullied.
about a
That's the next thing.
Bhrashtachar Mukt Bharat, a Bhrashtachar Mukt Bharat, we weren't talking about a squeaky clean Prime Minister. Now, I appreciate the fact that there are no cases against our Prime Minister, but we were talking about the guy in the RTO that I have to deal with, the guy in the
No, even the
Registrar's
government.
office that I have to deal with, the guy in every government service that I have to deal with on the ground.
what about the
And I'm
100
sorry to
crores
tell you,
being offered to our
Mr.
MLAs
Kohli,
in Karnataka?
the
Fair
Prime
point.
Minister's mood
Faye,
has
what about
not
the
reached the
100
ground.
crores
It
being
has
offered
not
by
changed the
BJP
people.
to our
Sanjay
MLAs
Jha.
in Karnataka?
Sanjay Jha, one second. It
No,
has
no, 1
not
minute.
changed on the
No,
ground.
1 minute.
Yogendra
What about
Yadav,
the 100
are
crores
we
being offered to our
a
MLAs
less
in
corrupt
Karnataka?
country?
We
Yogendra
have put
Yadav,
it on
are we a
record.
less corrupt country?
To my
I can't
mind,
hear
and
it.
I would wish to hear Shailesh Gandhiji's reaction to what I say.
wanted to add one thing.
No, it's to me, Yogendra Yadav. Can I complete this on the
Please,
corruption
please.
thing
Mr.
that I'm
Yadav, go
saying?
ahead. Yes.
To my mind, corruption being in public life requires three things. One, time. It's a function of time that it gets exposed. Remember, most of the UPA 2 corruption scandals were about UPA 1. It took time for them to be exposed. Second, it takes institutions which have integrity. Number three, it takes a culture of transparency. In the case of Mr. Modi's government, well, the time is too little, only 4 years, and a lot of things have started tumbling out now towards the end, which is how it always happens. Number two, institutions of integrity, those institutions have been curbed. And culture of transparency, there is none. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi might be able to tell us Why is this entire government with its highest legal officers trying its very best to ensure that Delhi University should not disclose its results of BA 1978? I mean, is this transparency in this country? On corruption, this government is guilty of not appointing Lokpal, not implementing the bills on the rules on disclosure
and
of
limiting
whistleblowers,
Yes.
is guilty of actually trying to dilute the Prevention of Corruption Act and actually persecuting honest officers as much as Congress used to do. So where is the difference? How can I say we are less corrupt?
We are not less corrupt. Krish Lakshmikant, Managing Director of Headhunters India, you had a point to make. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Yeah. Faye, two things. One, if you take the jobs, about 80% of the jobs are in the informal sector. They are not in the formal sector. That means people have to work. It could be the pakoda walas, which Mr. Modi talked about. It could be the chai wala somewhere down the road. But they are the people who are actually making the jobs. The 20-25% is the formal sector.
No, hang on. Krish Lakshmikant, I refuse, one second, I'm going to stop you there. I refuse to count pakoda walas and chai walas as job creation. That is not job creation. First of all, pakoda walas and chai walas occupy portions of the footpath that has not officially been given to them. They could be uprooted and tossed out anytime the local government decides to clean up that area. That is not secure. Secondly, there is child labor involved in these stalls. There are people being employed there who are not given benefits, who are worked beyond labor laws, who are not paid daily wage. We cannot, hand on our heart, count this as a government as actual job creation. That's completely unfair. Do we want pakoda shops and chai shops to mushroom on every footpath? Can we afford that? Do we want pedestrians to walk on the roads? Do we want cars to run over pedestrians? That is not an organized way to do anything. And that's a completely wrong assessment of the question of jobs. And you of all people should not propagate that pakoda wala idea. You know as well as I do that it's completely unfair.
I just gave an example.
Exactly.
You take the drivers who are working in Ola. Ola has 300,000 drivers working with them. Uber has something like 200,000. You mean to say they are the formal sector? None of them have ESI, none of them have
Yes, but they are not making pakodas.
But
there is a ledger somewhere with their names against it and how much money they're making and their bank accounts to which this money is being transferred. And the fact that they're all above the age of 18 and they have licenses and they're working for a licensed company. A pakoda shop is not the same thing.
No, Faye, the Ola driver is not working for Ola. He's a contractor. If today it's become a contract economy, and these people are not counted by the government.
So you are Krish Lakshmikant on my show today as the managing director. Hang on, as the managing director of Headhunters India, Krish Lakshmikant, you are on my show today arguing that working in a pakoda shop is a job that should be counted as on behalf of the government of India as job creation. That's your argument.
It's not a job, it's a form of employment.
No, I didn't say that. I said Modi said that.
Because companies like his, which have huge NPAs, don't create jobs.
See, the point
Modi
is,
has no answers. Modi has no solutions.
if you take Flipkart, madam,
Modi
Flipkart has got some 30,000 people who are supplying, more in the supply chain. They are not the employees of Flipkart. The same is with Swiggy. Swiggy has some 25,000 people working, but they are not on the rolls of Swiggy.
How many retail shops have they displaced?
Right, Mr. Guruswamy, please. Mr. Guruswamy, go ahead. Mr. Guruswamy, go ahead.
Nothing much has happened so far.
Mr. Guruswamy, go ahead.
You know this.
Mr. Guruswamy, I wanted to tell you one thing. There is something called, you are an economist. You should know about universal basic income, Mr. Guruswamy. You are talking of subsidy. Why are you not talking of UBI?
I know about
it is there now coming across the world. Why don't you talk about that?
Faye, want to make a rebuttal, please?
Yes, Mr. Guruswamy will make a rebuttal first. Mr. Guruswamy.
This jobs in the informal sector, which these people talk about Uber and Ola, all told, they've got 3 lakh drivers in the country. And many of them are displaced from some other sectors who stopped working somewhere and have gone to try their luck in the market, which is good. But only 3 lakh jobs. You create 120 lakh people are joining the workforce every year. And you keep talking about 3 lakh people. Now that is what I find absurd. Now if you had banks were lending more money, you would have created more jobs. But the NPAs have gone up. NPAs have gone up, all these companies. The top 10 NPAs have gone up from 7.6 lakh crores to over 11 lakh crores now. The interests are accumulating. Now we have our friend from Vedanta, his company owes 1 lakh crores. NPAs. And how are you going to create jobs without capital expenditure? If capital expenditure is only going to be 2,50,000 crores a year, how are you going to create jobs? I mean, I'm an economist, you please explain it to me. You people run companies, how do you create jobs without making investment? Now, I'm talking about subsidies. There are deserved subsidies and undeserved subsidies. Education, health is free in this country to poor people. It's a subsidy. But those are deserved subsidies. What has happened to education? 1.6% of GDP has now come to 1.3%. Health has come down to 1.2%. And undeserved subsidies. That is, the fertilizer subsidy which goes to the large farmer, the free bijli which goes to the farmer with bore wells and tube wells, all those are undeserved subsidies. Those are the subsidies, the domestic gas subsidy, the diesel petrol subsidy, all these subsidies are subsidies we're talking about. You've got to target them. Milk is subsidized for urban dwellers, electricity is subsidized. You've got to handle these things. You don't talk about that. It's easy to hack away at education for the common man, for the poor man, because he has no voice in the system. Nobody listens to him. So, Nalin, please try to understand there are subsidies and subsidies. And it will be important to increase expenditure on education and health and reduce some of these undeserved subsidies. Every time an electric company makes a loss, it's a subsidy. Air India makes a loss, it's a subsidy. All these are subsidies. Please, for heaven's sake, put an end to it. Say like Air India, you invested 43,000 crores in the last 5 years. And it's still bleeding. Shut it down.
Right, it is true the government has a lot of old companies that are running losses, have raked up a lot of debt, and we have not shut them down. Mr. Kohli, last opportunity to rebut what was being said. Go ahead, please.
With regard to Air India, because that was specifically brought up, there is an expression of interest for people to see if they would be interested in taking over Air India. The last time I kept track of it in the papers, I didn't see anyone expressing interest yet. Now the other argument is, yes, just let's shut it down. And therefore then there are larger considerations, even understanding that it's a loss-making enterprise, and it's not a loss-making enterprise in these last 4 years specifically, but nevertheless it's a government, and the government is in continuum. And in that context, with Air India, shutting it down raises some questions, just blanket like that. What are we going to do in terms of questions related to air security, pricing? One airline goes bust in the US and it has a massive implication on the entire market. Again, we read it in the papers. So as I said, on these issues, and they are substantive issues, they are not as if they are non-substantive issues, there would be discourses, and again I'm saying I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to pretend to be one. The right is for two economists who have the point of view to argue it out. The government is doing what it can do. There was a question that came up with regard to chai walas, pakoda walas, etc. Now maybe that's not part of the formal employment structure. But if I look at from the government doesn't distinguish between all of them. When it comes at 1 rupee, Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, I heard you very patiently. It was rather long. I just hope I deserve the same courtesy of finishing a point without being interjected. So I lost my point. Anyway, you may continue.
Well, you were talking about Air India, and I unfortunately have run out of time at this point. But I just want to put that
Air India, I was on something else. I lost my point.
All right, I want to put the Twitter poll up on the screen. This is as of 8:45. Okay, Sanjay Jha, go ahead. Sanjay Jha, go ahead.
Faye, 1 point, because this dominated political discourse was black money. And I want to tell you that the country has been actually kept in the dark. Black money in our economy is actually at a skyrocketing high. And you have a government, by the way, and I want to raise this point so that the people know, that is told that electoral bonds, the funding of political parties, if a corporate donates money to the BJP, the name of the donor will be kept hidden. Nobody is going to know about it, and it will be hidden even from the shareholders of the company. Is this transparency? Isn't that a way of channelizing black money into funding political parties? So I think we are living in a very hypocritical world. We're living in a hypocritical universe, and I think it's important that we talk about it. Enough of this headline-grabbing rhetorical speeches. I think people of India have a right to know the truth.
Okay, Sanjay. All right. I have, in fact, run out of time here, but we will continue this conversation.
May I rebut that?
I'm being told that I've run out of time, but on your screen is the Twitter poll that we ran on Mirror Now's Twitter handle today. It seems evenly split down the middle almost. Did the Modi government deliver on jobs? 49% says no, 46% says yes. Did the Modi government deliver on the promises made to farmers? There's an astounding number that says no. 85% of those voted on our Twitter poll say no, the promises to farmers were not kept. And this is a tough one. The rating on Mengai. Have we managed to keep the rates or the prices down for the ordinary citizen? 83% says no, 16% says yes. And of course, the last one, infrastructure. And it does seem, unlike the panel who was speaking, 81% of those who voted on the poll believe that infrastructure promises were not kept either, although this is something that the government is particularly proud of. We're going to wrap up here, but remember that there is another year to come, and this is a year of reckoning when we will, in preparation for the election next year, rate every part of this government. It does give the government 1 year to fulfill as many promises as they can. Thanks for watching.